We support the Real News Network because we want to have independent journalism. And in a democracy, there's nothing more important than the free flow of information. Please join with us and help support the Real News Network.
As the 2008 presidential election draws nearer, to discuss it, we're joined by actor, filmmaker, and activist Danny Glover. Danny's the executive producer of the new documentary film, Trouble the Water, which tells the story of an aspiring rap artist and her husband trapped in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. Thanks for joining us, Danny.
Good, good, good.
So, Danny, you've been a critic of Obama on some of his foreign policy issues, some domestic issues, particularly health care. Yet, in a few days, you're going to be going to Nevada to campaign for Obama. Why?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's anything inconsistent with the sports that we need, that needs to happen for Obama, that we all need to be engaged in. You know, in the political process in any democracy is a process in which there's criticism, dissent, and criticism, particularly constructive criticism. And we need to, as I've said before, build a movement around the kind of world, the imaginative world that we want to see, and the policy that we want to see. So I find that going to Nevada and using whatever visibility that I have, that's afforded me, using that visibility to support his candidacy and support him as president is very important.
Now, what do you say to Nader supporters and other third-party supporters that there's not much difference between the two and one should use these elections to make a point?
Well, the point is that clearly there are positions that seem to be ones in which both McCain and Obama have the same, basically say the same thing. But I think there's a qualitative difference between the two, and how we look at that qualitative difference is one in terms of real access.
And what's the difference?
And the difference is accessibility. I believe that there's a point where when we talk about the issues around workers, we talk about the issues around poverty, healthcare, education, in some sense it's not simply just rhetoric, but we have the opportunity to really reinforce ideas which will bring about, I think, a discussion around qualitative change within the Obama campaign and within the Obama presidency. So I think that we, in sorts, we have to forcibly create the space necessary for this discourse, but I think it's available for us in the Obama campaign.
The counter-argument goes like this, that there's really, these are two sections of the elite fighting it out for power. I think on another interview we did earlier, a few weeks ago, I played a clip of George Will saying these elections are not about whether or not the elite will govern, but which section of the elite will govern. And I mean, you consider the McCain section more dangerous, or what? Why pick? Like, why not just condemn them all, as Nader or Cynthia McKinney say?
Certainly, there's value in a democracy in having more than just a two-party system. But within the situation that we find ourselves at this particular point in time, I think there's certainly a McKinney candidacy for the Green Party, a candidacy with Nader is important in sense that it still redefines and outlines, I think, the issues that we have to address in real terms. I mean, for instance, you know, in terms of just the Nader issue, when Nader talked about brought up the issue and certainly supported the ideas and supported the sentiment of most of the population to abandon the bailout. I mean, that was important. The discussion about the bailout could take another platform, or it can have another resonance with people if we talk about the bailout from that vantage point. Those issues are never discussed, not even within the Obama campaign. But I think it's so important to bring that up. But at the same time, if we are going to talk about having some sort of impact on this democracy, I think we have to accept the fact that we're going to have to deal with the lesser two evils. And I consider Obama the lesser two evils.
When you talk about building a movement, if there's going to be a movement, one would think, with any real strength, there has to be some support for it amongst ordinary workers. I know you've been, I don't know if our viewers know how involved you've been in many attempts to organize you on both sides of the border, in the U.S. and in Canada. You're quite involved with the union movement. What's your sense amongst workers? Do you see that, especially with this growing economic crisis, is there some motion there where there might be a movement amongst workers?
I see a movement among workers, a discussion around workers, but that movement has to be not simply just limited to, but important, not limited to just workers getting better pay and health care and the pensions and everything else. It has to be, in some sense, be part of a much larger discussion in terms of context in which the workers talk about a real qualitative change in the system itself, a redefining of the system itself on all aspects of it. You know, from the vantage point, if workers are able to kind of identify the relationship between the various trade agreements and their own plight, and to look at that in terms of the kind of accumulation of debt and all the other issues, if workers are able to embrace those ideas, then they will become the basis of talking about what does this new, what does this system, what is the evolution of capitalism, or what does this system look like?
You've been involved in a lot of attempts to organize unorganized workplaces. What are the obstacles to that? As we know, there's in the private sector in the U.S., there's only 8% of workers in unions, which is a number which most people are surprised at. If you add the public sector, you're just under 11%.
It's horrific, you know. I mean, and those numbers have been diminishing for years, you know, and certainly part of those numbers have ways because certainly jobs have been outsourced and unions have been depoliticized to some degree. At the same time that communities have been deindustrialized, you know. So when we talk about what does this new system look like, it certainly would have to employ a new idea around reindustrializing the U.S. The fact that even though at 8%, a great deal of this has been certainly the attack on workers in the media, the attack on workers, and the lack of the political will from politicians. You know, to talk about issues around living wage, to talk about the importance of having of health care and benefits, et cetera, et cetera. You know, to talk about working conditions, to talk about basically those things as rights, as opposed to just privileges.
Well, I guess this will be a very interesting test. If there is a Democratic president and the Democrats control both houses, there's some very significant legislation that exists that obstructs the organizing of unions and weakens unions, from Taft-Hartley to other pieces of legislation. You know. So there's going to be no excuse not to overturn Taft-Hartley, and there's going to be no excuse
or to pass legislation that supports the organization, the uninhibited organization, organizing of workers, you know, and allow workers to be organized and to choose whether they want to have unions in the workplace.
And Obama's going to have to make a choice here. He's gotten a lot of support from Wall Street. He's got a lot of support from unions. Right. And they're not going to have the same opinion on what to do about this legislation.
I think, on the one hand, that there has to be some sort of accommodation to the domestic issue. Clearly, in terms of the ability for of workers to purchase. If we're going to get out of this, workers are going to have to purchase. In any of these scenarios, will people be willing to spend, given the uncertainty of the economy and given the low rate of savings within the economy itself? So I think there's some real issues, but the idea of having an Obama candidacy, an Obama presidency rather, so we move from candidacy to presidency, and a democratically run Senate and House provides some sort of opportunity where people could go to the source in a different way.
Well, we've heard a little bit in this segment of the interview about what you think. In the next segment of our interview, I want to know why you think what you think. And what I mean by that is you're one of the actors in Hollywood that's had one of the more successful careers. You keep sticking your neck out on political issues. So I'm going to, in the next segment of the interview, ask you why you do that. So please join us for the next segment of our interview with Danny Glover.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars and into environmental disaster, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Real hope means facing a complex reality. Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute. Visit therealnews.com.